Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're starting a new book today. This is volume 6. It's titled The Natural Law of Kamma. As you guys know, as we work our way through these chapters, we start different books at different times depending on, how the chapters are laid out. And today we happen to be starting this new book, The Natural Law of Kamma. Well, this particular book goes in and talks about specific details related to the natural law of Kamma, and these are the specific teachings related to this natural law. But we could really say that the entire book series is related to the natural law of Kamma, because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what you're doing is you're cultivating wisdom about this natural law. Remember, this is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being who's overseeing this natural law and determining who gets what. Instead, it's like a sequence of events. Of whatever decisions you make, it's going to lead to a certain result. And when we talk about awakening, it means to cultivate wisdom. And what the mind in the unenlightened state lacks wisdom of is the natural law of Kamma. It firmly believes that the problems and difficulties that we experience are coming from other people. That's what the mind thinks in the unenlightened state, because it's unawakened. It doesn't have wisdom to see this natural law. But slowly but surely, what you're doing over the course of your journey to enlightenment is you're cultivating wisdom about this natural law so that you can make wiser and wiser decisions. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have any unwholesome Kamma. You will have extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma, getting to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. And this is coming through decisions that you're making. So we're going to be studying in the same way that we always do, where I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read one of our chapters, and then I'm going to share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to the specific chapter that we're studying. But just keep in mind that it's helpful to read these beforehand, because we're going to go in and talk about some very specific things related to this natural law, understanding that all the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another are helping you to understand this. But now we're going to talk about very specific things related to this natural law. So if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom and you'd like to ask questions, you can put that in the comment section. I'll be able to see it by just inserting it into the comment section, and I'll be able to answer your question that way. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask questions that way. And also, if you'd like to read, you can also electronically raise your hand, and I'll be able to see you as well. So is there someone who would like to read this very first chapter? This is chapter 1 of volume 6. So it looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. 6 aspects of Kamma to be understood. Monks, when it was said, Kamma should be understood. The creation of Kamma should be understood. The diversity of Kamma should be understood. The result of Kamma should be understood. The elimination of the creation of Kamma should be understood. The way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma should be understood. For what reason was that said, or was this said? 1, it is volition, choices, decisions, monks, that I call Kamma. For having willed intentional choices and decisions, one acts by body, speech, or mind. 2, and what is your creation of Kamma? Contact is its creation. 3, and what is the diversity of Kamma? There is Kamma to be experienced in hell. There is Kamma to be experienced in the animal realm. There is Kamma to be experienced in the realm of afflicted spirits. There is Kamma to be experienced in the human realm. and there is Kamma to be experienced in the heavenly realm. This is called the diversity of Kamma. 4. And what is the result of Kamma? The result of Kamma, I say, is threefold. To be experienced in this very life or in the next rebirth or on some subsequent occasion. This is called the result of Kamma. 5. And what, monks, is the elimination of the creation of Kamma? With the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of Kamma. 6. This noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, namely right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When, monks, a noble disciple thus understands Kamma, the creation of Kamma, the diversity of Kamma, the result of Kamma, the elimination of the creation of Kamma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, he understands his penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. When it was said, Kamma should be understood, the creation of Kamma should be understood, the diversity of Kamma should be understood, the result of Kamma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of Kamma should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma should be understood. It is because of this that this was said. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here we have 6 aspects of Kamma that needs to be understood in order to be able to fully awaken and get to the point where you understand this natural law. Now you can navigate the world peacefully. Because when your mind is having the struggles and difficulties of the unenlightened state with that lack of wisdom, it will have stress and anxiety and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. But when you awaken to this natural law, your mind won't have that struggle anymore. So remember, what the Buddha is helping you to do is to purify the mind, getting rid of craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. That's the high level way of talking about these 10 fetters. So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome Kamma. You're going to see that here in a moment when we study the next chapter, that you're going to be able to see the Buddha talking about the creation of unwholesome Kamma comes from craving, anger, and ignorance. So for example, if I'm out in the world actively trying to kill another living being, like a human being, there's a certain amount of craving there. There's a longing, yearning for that to occur. And there's a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will towards this other beings who this individual is trying to actively murder or kill. And then where that's coming from is the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. And there's intention there to be able to go out and actively kill. And now, because of that, now I'm going to experience unwholesome Kamma coming back to me if that's what I chose to do, because of the unwise decision to function through craving, anger, and ignorance. This is where I can get beat up, I can get murdered, I can get arrested. There's any number of things that can happen if you go out and actively try to kill other living beings. So what the Buddha is saying here in this first aspect of Kamma is that it's volition that he calls Kamma, that you have to have the certain will, intentional choices and decisions acting by body, speech, and mind. That's what's producing the Kamma, because you're making a decision through the craving, anger, and ignorance. And now it's going to produce certain Kamma. And then there's wholesome Kamma too, which is generated through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And you would have to have intentional choices through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom to be able to then produce wholesome Kamma. And that's acts by body, speech, and mind. So you'd have to have the will or the intentional choices. Whereas if you're just walking down the street, for example, maybe talking to a friend, and a cockroach runs under your foot and you squash it and it gets killed, you're not going to experience any unwholesome Kamma there, because there wasn't any craving, anger, and ignorance that was behind your decision, that you hadn't willed that decision. That wasn't your intention to kill that cockroach, but it just ran under your foot while you were walking down the street. So the first aspect of Kamma to be able to understand is that there has to be intentional choices and decisions, that it's coming from either craving, anger, and ignorance, or generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, and it's going to produce either wholesome Kamma or unwholesome Kamma. And then the creation of Kamma is from contact. There needs to be contact between you and another being, or you and some material possession. There needs to be physical contact in order for there to be some type of Kamma created. And now I would include into that being online. There's actual contact, right? It's not necessarily physical in nature, but there's contact here. Remember, when we talk about contact, it's the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind through the 6 sense spaces. There needs to be some type of contact, either with a living being, or there needs to be the not only with the living being, but with a material object as well. If you have contact with any of these things, then you're producing Kamma. Then your Kamma that you create through this contact, it's going to be experienced in one of the 5 realms. That's why these realms exist, in order to be able to experience the Kamma. So hell, the animal realm, afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. There's Kamma to be experienced in all of these. Just to be able to get to this human realm, it means that we would have created a certain amount of wholesome Kamma in the past to be able to get here, because this is the ideal existence, to be able to learn and grow and develop and get to enlightenment. So we're experiencing a certain amount of wholesome Kamma by being here in the human realm, but based on the decisions that you make, you're either going to experience wholesome or unwholesome Kamma, whether it's coming from craving, anger, and ignorance, or your decisions coming from generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And then you can't run and hide from your Kamma, because it's going to be experienced either in this life, the next life, or some subsequent occasion. Now, I realize with these 2 aspects of Kamma, it means that somebody would have independently verified the 5 realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth. If you haven't done that yet, it's okay, but just understand what the Buddha is teaching you here, so that as you do independently verify those things, you'll know what the Buddha is teaching you is true. So what the Buddha is teaching here in this 4th aspect of Kamma is that you're going to experience the results of your Kamma, either in this life, the next life, or some future life, some subsequent occasion. You can't run and hide from the Kamma that you're creating. And then the 5th one, the Buddha talks about the elimination of the creation of Kamma is happening through the elimination of contact. If you can eliminate contact, then there's the elimination of the creation of Kamma. And where this is really helpful is, like, let's just say you understand that your ultimate goal on the path to enlightenment is to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma and get to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. That's what you were ultimately getting to. And that means that whenever your unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you while you're unenlightened, anytime unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, you've got to figure out a way to extinguish it, bury it, so that it is eliminated. Well, if you eliminate contact, you'll eliminate the creation of Kamma. So let's just say you come home and you're living with a roommate or a life partner or your children or something like that. And when you walk in, maybe they start yelling and hollering and screaming at you, right? Maybe they start talking really harsh and hostile and bitter with you, because you've probably done these things in the past, and now part of your unwholesome Kamma is there's going to be people who treat you that way as well from time to time as you're working your way towards enlightenment. Eventually, when you get to enlightenment, this will be very few and far between, but it'll still happen, but your mind just won't be affected by it. But it's very rare. But in your process of getting to enlightenment, you're going to be experiencing a certain amount of this coming back to you. Well, if you understand that it's contact that produces Kamma, and that if you stand there and continue to hear all of this hostility and bitterness coming at you, now your mind might actually flare up, because if you still have craving in your mind might flare up and you might start being hostile and bitter and harsh back. And because of this contact, someone's coming at you with anger, and now you go back at them with anger. You're just producing more unwholesome Kamma in that situation. You haven't extinguished anything. You're actually producing more unwholesome Kamma. But if you can understand that you're trying to eliminate the creation of Kamma here, that maybe in the past you have been bitter and harsh and hostile with these people, and now when you're coming home, they're choosing to be that way with you. Well, instead of standing there and being bitter and harsh and hostile back, instead just eliminate contact. Walk away. If that means going to another room, or if that means going outside, whether that means leaving, getting in the car and going for a drive, whatever it is, just eliminate contact. That's going to eliminate the creation of Kamma. And slowly but surely, what these people will learn is that if they're interested in talking with you, they're going to need to do that calmly and peacefully. Because if you keep leaving like that week after week, month after month, every time they're bitter and hostile and harsh, they're going to figure it out. That if they're interested in spending time with you and talking with you, they're going to need to be calm. Because what the unenlightened mind does with the lack of wisdom in this natural law is when someone's coming at you with bitterness and harshness and hostility, the mind thinks the way to solve that is to go back at them with anger and bitterness and hostility. But you can't extinguish anger with more anger. That's not the way that gets extinguished. So you need to be able to eliminate contact. But when you have craving and you have ego in your mind, it's going to be very challenging to walk away, especially when they might say things like, oh, see, you don't love me. See, you don't care about me, or things of this nature. But you need to just understand the best thing you can do in that situation is walk away, because it's going to eliminate the creation of Kamma. So that's what number 5 is helping you to be able to see how to practice in these situations. But then number 6 is really giving you the detail that it's the Noble Eightfold Path that is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. Because now you need to start making decisions through the Eightfold Path, where in the past we didn't do that. We didn't have right view. We didn't understand that it was our own mind that was causing these feelings. We didn't have right intention and right speech and all these other factors. So now if you're practicing this and dialing it in closer and closer in all your relationships, now as you practice this for an extended period of time, that's what's going to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. So you're going to spend probably multiple years just getting your practice up to the Eightfold Path and practicing that well. And now once you get your practice up to the Eightfold Path, you need to live your life that way for an extended period of time so that all your unwholesome Kamma that is coming back to you, you're extinguishing it and extinguishing it and extinguishing it. And over time, you'll get to a point where you won't have any unwholesome Kamma because you've extinguished it, because you've been practicing the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time. So this is the 6 aspects of Kamma to be able to understand this natural law in detail. And one of the ways that the Buddha teaches, and you guys might have picked this up by now as you've been reading and learning his teachings, is he will start with a certain paragraph that he's going to tell you what he's going to teach you. Then he's going to teach it to you. Then he's going to tell you what he taught you, right? That's what even business professionals say nowadays is a really wise way to present material to an audience, is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, right? This is what the Buddha was doing 2,500 years ago. He says, this is what I'm going to teach you. Then he teaches it to you. Then he teaches you what he taught you, right? So this is the way the Buddha teaches. So that's what this last paragraph is. And you'll see this a lot in the way that he actually teaches. So let me know if you have any questions on any of these 6 aspects of Kamma here. These are 6 things that you need to understand in order to be able to fully extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma and get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma, because that's what the Buddha's talking about down here, where he says he understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. That's the whole goal of what you're working towards. Because part of the elimination of that unwholesome Kamma is the purification of your mind and getting rid of the pollutions. So it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir. You need to unmute there. There you go, Vibhav.
Thank you, Teacher David. I had a question on the result of Kamma. So in unwholesome Kamma can be experienced, or how Kamma can be experienced in this life, in the next life, or in a subsequent occasion, right? And so if you have unwholesome Kamma, or if you've done something with your body, speech, or mind that will produce some unwholesome Kamma, but that can be produced at some point in the future, maybe in the next life. But then you're practicing the Eightfold Path to eliminate unwholesome Kamma. How do you know that some Kamma that has been unwholesome Kamma that was supposed to be, or that would have been produced in like a later life would now be eliminated because you practice the Eightfold Path? Because is that because your craving, anger, and ignorance have been eliminated, right?
You're talking about a previous life, right? Like, how do you know if the Kamma you're extinguishing is from a previous life or this life? Is that what you're saying?
Either previous life or something in like even the past you may have done like, a few years ago.
Yeah. So when you learn the natural law of Kamma and you're experiencing unwholesome Kamma coming back to you, one of the things that you'll get really good at is being able to peer into that unwholesome Kamma and what you're experiencing to be able to figure out what it is that you did in order to produce that unwholesome Kamma. What were the decisions that you made that produced that specific unwholesome Kamma? Because in order to be able to unravel all this and extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, you've got to stop making those decisions that led to the production of that unwholesome Kamma. So when you can peer into it and be able to see it, that's what's going to help you. So you're going to need to look at lots of different examples from your life and perhaps other people's life too, even though you can't really see other people's Kamma 100%. It's better to look at your life, but sometimes you can look at others as well. This is what's going to help you to be able to discern what were the decisions that you made that led to that. And now you can make different decisions so you'll experience different results.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you know that you will not be experiencing unwholesome Kamma because you've eliminated your craving, anger, and ignorance. So that at that point you'll know that you'll not be experiencing any unwholesome Kamma.
Yeah, you'll know that it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't had any discontentedness at all. That there's not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. And you'll know that you no longer have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. And during that process, as you were working towards that, there was unwholesome Kamma coming back to you. But each time, as your mind still had craving, anger, and ignorance, as it was coming back to you, you were extinguishing it. And these situations got further and farther between each other. But eventually, you're going to get a nice long 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of no discontentedness. And you'll see that there's no unwholesome Kamma coming back to you. You'll still experience certain things. I think in this class we're going to be studying I can't remember if it's in this class or not. I think it's in this book. It's the 5 unobtainables, where you can't obtain the elimination of sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. So even when you've extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma, you're still going to be experiencing sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. Because sometimes when I tell people that you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma, you no longer have unwholesome Kamma, what people hear is everything's going my way. I'm not experiencing anything else other than what I want to experience. But that's not the case. You'll still experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction, but your mind just won't be affected by it. Your mind will be completely peaceful and joyful. And you'll see that there was no decisions that you could have made differently that would have turned out that situation to be different than it was. Because those 5 things are based in impermanence. Sickness is just impermanence. Aging is just impermanence. Death is just impermanence. Loss, in terms of losing things, that is just impermanence. And same thing with destruction. Now, you can experience these things that are unwholesome Kamma, right? You can experience sickness, aging, or not aging, but you can experience, increased aging based on unwholesome Kamma. And you can experience death as a result of unwholesome Kamma. And you can also experience loss and destruction. But the difference is by the time you get to enlightenment, there's not going to be any discontentedness associated with those things. And there's no decisions that you could have made differently that will have that situation turn out differently for you.
Okay. And I guess last question on this is that the fact that, or the reason that unwholesome Kamma is experienced in the future life is basically you're carrying the craving onto the next life.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about on the phone the other day. I'll explain it here because other people might have questions about this too. There's nothing mystical or magical about how you're experiencing karma from one life to the next. It's not like there's this black cloud following you around. It's not like there's this force in the sky somewhere that's controlling what you experience. It's literally the results of your decisions. So if you have person A, which has certain craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, certain pollutions in their mind, when they get to the end of that life, their mind is going to dissolve. But if there's still craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, that's got to find a new mind. So you might think about this as cardboard boxes. If you have cardboard box A, which is person A, it's a certain color, certain shape, certain texture, and there's craving and residual memories that are in that person's mind. When they get to the end of that life, that cardboard box is going to dissolve. In other words, the mind, it's not permanent, it's going to dissolve. But if there's contents, if there's cravings, because the person is unenlightened, those cravings are going to need to find a new mind. It needs to find a new box because there's contents. It needs to find a new cardboard box. So cardboard box B is a completely brand new person. And now this cardboard box B, it's a certain color, certain shape, certain texture, certain size, and it's got the craving and residual memories from cardboard box A. But now cardboard box B, this person B, they're going to start making decisions through these cravings that they had from their previous life. So we say that that's past life Kamma, but in reality, it's decisions that are being made in that current life that are leading to the results that they're experiencing. To bring this kind of full circle, let's just say there was a person named Bob that was person A. And this person was very promiscuous and having lots of sex with lots of different people. And as they went all the way through the end of their life, they were still having lots and lots and lots and lots of sex with lots of people. They had very strong sexual craving. Well, when they died, those cravings and residual memories went into this new mind. And now this new mind, we'll just call her Barbara or, any name you would like to come up with. Let's just say this person is now functioning through those same cravings. And now let's just say Barbara is also having sex with lots of different people, having lots of different relationships, maybe even getting married and broken relationship after broken relationship. And let's just say by the age of 40, 45, they contract HIV. And now let's just say they end up dying as a result of this. Well, we can say that this was past life Kamma, but it was from the decisions that was being made in that particular life. Because at the age of 20, let's just say Barbara would have found the teachings of the Buddha, learned about craving, learned about how unwise it is to have so many countless relationships like that, and they would have never actually contracted HIV and actually died, right? So this is the cravings from their previous life that they're acting upon in their experience and results in their current life. But we can call that past life Kamma as well, because Bob, his decisions that he was making, he never got HIV. But the decisions that he was making to have sex, he's going to experience the results of that in the current life. That's why he had such a hectic life and had so many relationships and so many arguments and problems. But he also experienced the results of that in the future life too, in the next life, that this next being Barbara, she experienced some unwholesome karma too as a result of the cravings from the previous life. So this is how it's actually being experienced from one life to the next. It's not anything mystical or magical.
Okay, so can I ask a question on the mystical and magical part?
Yeah, you can ask whatever you like.
So I guess the question is related to what we were talking about, the monk winning a lottery. So I understand that there's nothing mystical and magical about the fact that, as you were saying, the wisdom of the monk is that he opened a bank account, and that was his wisdom. And when the drawing of the lottery happened, his name or his account was somehow chosen to be the account that won the lottery. there was no intent on him like being participating in the lottery, but the bank officials they chose his name. So I understand that there's nothing mystical and magical about him choosing to open a bank account. But I guess the part that I'm not super clear about is that in all the people who are part of a lottery, who were part of the bank's lottery, his name being picked out of whether they put it in a jar or whatever, however they did that lottery system, that seems like mystical or magical, because I mean there are probably thousands of bank accounts in that box from which his was chosen. And there's the fact that he opened a bank account the wholesome karma that he experienced by winning the lottery seems to be, I guess, in some way disproportional to his act of wisdom of opening the bank account. So that part, saying that if there are thousands of lottery tickets in a jar and somebody's picking out a lottery ticket and somebody's name comes out of it, that part seems mystical and magical, because that's like a low probability event, right?
So somebody was going to win this lottery, and it was going to be among the people who opened bank accounts. And if they let's just go with the idea that they put a bunch of slips of paper in a jar and they pulled one out. There was just a cause and effect, a sequence of events that occurred there. It wasn't anything mystical or magical. The only thing that ordained practitioner did is he opened a bank account. So you've got to look at the decisions that led to this particular result. We talked about this, but I know that usually when we talk about things, you don't get it. You need to talk about it multiple times, but I'm going to say the exact same things that I shared with you previously, is that all that he did was open a bank account. Had he chosen not to open a bank account, he wouldn't have won. He wouldn't have won that money. So there's nothing mystical or magical here. There was a sequence of events that the ordained practitioner chose, which was 1, to open an account. 2, he put some money in there, right? And now there was a sequence of events on the bank side that, let's just say, they put everybody's name in a jar, and then somebody reached in and pulled it out. There was just a sequence of events that occurred. That's all it was. There was nothing mystical or magical here. I don't know why your mind's thinking that way, but it's just very simple, very basic.
Okay, I'll discuss it with you later. I can carry on.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So it looks like Calvin has a question here. Is it true that the elimination of unwholesome karma can happen in the present life? Yes, that's what it means to get to enlightenment. That if an individual practices the Eightfold Path closely, and you bring your practice up to that, and then you live your life that way for an extended period of time, you'll extinguish all your unwholesome karma and get to a point where you're doing that in this particular life. And now, once you've extinguished all your unwholesome karma, your mind's enlightened. You'll experience the complete peace and calm, serenity, contentedness with joy, and all those other things that I talk about related to the enlightened mental state. That you'll know that you've extinguished all your unwholesome karma because your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. It looks like Kristen or Ted has a question. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, teacher. So your example earlier about, being confronted with somebody who's maybe not practicing right speech and a lot of anger and ill will in the mind. And as you know, I have a situation in my family where there's somebody who's struggling with that. And so I've taken the advice and removed myself from the situation anytime that occurs, and just stand up and say, I'm going to go now and leave. And I've been doing that. But I do find that when I come out of the situation, the last time it happened, my mind wasn't as shaky, which was good, but I still came home and talked about it. And I'm wondering if I keep perpetuating this, and maybe that is my unwholesome karma, keep coming back to me because I end up sort of talking about the situation. Like with Ted, I mean, I'm not really it's just with him, but there's still that conversation that's happening about it. And I wonder if that's producing unwholesome karma for me by continuing to even talk about it. Is it better for me to just walk away, and try to just let go of, anything that's coming up in the mind or in the body, and then just leave it there? So that was one question.
If you're not gossiping and slandering, not gamble. If you're not gossiping and slandering, then there's no unwholesome karma there. So you can talk about things without gossip and slander. For example, I went to have a conversation with somebody today. They were actually a bit bitter and harsh and hostile within the first 10 seconds of talking to them, and I just said thank you, and I didn't say thank you. I just said, okay, I understand, and I just stood up and left. But I needed to actually go talk to somebody about this, not because I was having issues or anything, but because it impacted somebody else who was involved in the situation, not involved in the immediate situation, but in the lead up to it. So you've got to look at, what is my purpose behind this conversation? So I needed to go talk to this person because they were helping me with this. And I said, hey, look, we're not going to be able to go forward with that thing because of this and blah, 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 blah. And there was no gossip and slander there. So you can talk about these things, but you've got to look at, what is my purpose here? Is my purpose to inform Ted that this person is being bitter and harsh and hostile? Well, he already knows that. It doesn't need to be that conversation. But if there's something like, say, Ted's getting ready to go to that person's house, and now you were like, hey, heads up, I was just there 5 minutes ago, and they were pretty upset, just to let you know where they're at. There's a purpose there to let them know. So you've got to look at your purpose of why you're communicating, and then make sure that you aren't gossiping and slandering as part of it, meaning degrading or diminishing the person's reputation.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me add to this too.
Right.
Let me add to this, Kristen, is that there's nothing that you can say, like if you were saying something to Ted, that's not going to perpetuate this situation to continue to happen. The root cause of why this situation is happening is that person has craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind. It's not because you're talking to Ted. So like, when I say that you have harmonious relationships with everybody around you, that doesn't mean that everybody around you is treating you like gold. That's not what that means. It means that you can function with everybody and anybody around you without any bitterness, without any hostility, without any arguments. You can do that. But you're going to have potentially people that are in your life who might be bitter and harsh and hostile. And you'll just figure out ways that doesn't impact the things that you're working on. So for example, this person that I needed to go talk to today, I knew that they have a history of being bitter and harsh and hostile, but this is someone that I need to talk to every once in a while in order to accomplish a certain thing that I'm trying to accomplish. But it's very minimal. If I talk to this person once every 3 months or once every 6 months, that's actually a lot. There's really not much for me to talk to this person about, because I can just go ahead and do all the things that I'm going to do. But when I'm with that person, or I'm needing to talk with that person, there's no bitterness, there's no hostility, there's no aggression coming from me. I wouldn't describe it as this person is harmonious, but when I'm with that person, I am harmonious. So I have a harmonious relationship here, meaning that I don't have any bitterness or hostility with this person.
Okay. Thank you, teacher. And then the last question about that is, so I think I understand that though there are people out in the world that are going to not necessarily do things the way I do them, and may speak harshly and bitter and things like this. Is that, so if I am in contact with people like this, is that just that they've chosen to be that way, or is that also still somewhat of my karma from, say, past lives, or something in this life that I'm now having to kind of deal with and extinguish? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what the mind's oftentimes looking for is it's looking for black and white. And it says, tell me that it's like this all the time and tell me that it's like that all the time. And that's not the way that any of this works. So whenever somebody's being bitter and harsh and hostile, it's always because of their craving, anger, and ignorance. That's the root cause of all of that stuff. But then you've got to look at the decisions that are being made by you that could potentially be contributing to this situation continuing to reoccur. And it's not always so straightforward. That's why you have to look at each situation differently. So you need to look, have I ever been bitter and harsh and hostile with this person? Right? Well, if you have been, then yeah, that's your unwholesome karma coming back to you. But in the situation that I'm talking about with this person that I interact with from time to time, I've never been bitter with this person ever in my entire life. I've known this person for about 8 years, and I've only ever been loving and kind with this person from the very beginning. But their mind has this craving, anger, and ignorance, and it's so deep and so thick, it doesn't really take much for this person to pop off. And then when that kind of stuff happens, I just walk away. And then I wait until they calm down for a few days, a few weeks, or what have you, a few months, and then I might go talk to this person again if I have another situation. But there's nothing that I've done or said or conducted in order for this to be my unwholesome karma. That's why it just keeps reoccurring, that it's just this person and their craving, anger, and ignorance. So whenever you're experiencing a situation like this, you need to always look at it closely and figure out, what is this coming from? Of course, it's craving, anger, and ignorance, but are there any decisions that you made? Did you use wrong speech? Were you using wrong action? Did you have wrong intention here? You always need to look at that stuff first and make sure you understand, see if there's anything that you need to extinguish on your side. But eventually you're going to get to a point where you've had so many interactions and you've been practicing the Eightfold Path so closely that you know that, hey, you don't have any of that stuff whatsoever. And there's nothing for you to change about how you interacted with this person. And it's just their craving, anger, and ignorance that is being triggered. And now their mind is choosing to operate through that.
Okay. Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. All right, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. And it looks like we have some questions coming in here on YouTube. Let's see. It looks like John, he's saying, will an enlightened being not experience any Kamma if they have eliminated its creation? Is eliminating contact meant to mean only in reference to unwholesome things? If you eliminate contact, you will eliminate the creation of any Kamma, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. But as an enlightened being, you're still having contact. But your contact is going to be generating wholesome Kamma. So you'll still be experiencing the creation of Kamma as an enlightened being, but it's all going to be exclusively wholesome Kamma. And you'll be experiencing that in this life. So will an enlightened being not experience any Kamma if they eliminate its creation? They're still going to just experience wholesome Kamma in that situation, but they are no longer having contact that is producing unwholesome Kamma. And then, is eliminating contact meant to mean only in reference to unwholesome things? You can eliminate contact and it's going to produce the elimination of any Kamma. But what we're really focusing on here is the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, because that's what you would like to ultimately get to. But even if you're doing something wholesome, let's just say you're going to an orphanage and you're volunteering for 30 minutes. If you choose to leave that orphanage, you're no longer producing wholesome Kamma. You're not practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom any longer. So it was only that 30 minutes that you were producing wholesome Kamma. And now if you are experiencing some type of unwholesome Kamma, if you choose to step away from that, you're also eliminating the creation of any further unwholesome Kamma in that situation. So John has some more here. He says, how are residual memories separate from the mind? I ask because persist into the new box, but the mind itself doesn't. Wouldn't memories depend on the mind? So I would expect them to disappear too. No, they're independent. So memories are call residual, right? There's residual in the mind. So the Buddha talks about this as a slight residual, that there's a residual of clinging and craving, and then also memories can be in the mind too, because they're non-physical, they're not tangible, and they can move from mind to mind. This is how an individual, if you were learning and practicing the teachings in one life, and then you die, this is how you'll actually learn them a lot easier and a lot better in your next life, because you have residual memories from your previous life, right? So this is how the mind experiences that from one life to the next, is that it's cravings and residual memories that are going from one life to the next. And this new mind has the capability of understanding the memories from a previous life. This is how the Buddha and other people have observed their past lives, and they know what their past lives are because they have memories from those things. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so let's move to the next one. That was a pretty full one. So this is chapter 2. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Kristen. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Chapter 2. 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. Monks, there are these 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. What 3? Craving, desire, greed, attachment is a cause for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. 2. Anger, hatred, ill will is a cause for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. 3. Ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality is a cause for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. Suppose, monks, seeds that are intact, unspoiled, not damaged by wind and the sun's heat, fertile, well preserved, were positioned in a well-prepared ground in a good field, and receive proper rainfall. In this way, those seeds will grow, increase, and mature. So too, any unwholesome Kamma, monks, created through craving, born of craving, caused by craving, originated by craving, ripens whenever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its results, either in this very life or in the next, rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. So too, any unwholesome Kamma created through anger, born of anger, caused by anger, originated by anger, ripens whenever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its result, either in this life or in the next, rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. So too, any unwholesome Kamma created through ignorance, born of ignorance, caused by ignorance, originated by ignorance, ripens whenever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its results, either in this very life or in the next, rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. These are the 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. So if you guys have been studying with me any amount of time, you've already learned this. This is just the words of the Buddha to help you see what he actually taught. And usually when I teach the natural law of Kamma and the 3 poisons and things like this in some of the foundational programs, I actually use these exact words here. So remember, craving is that longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of its affection, the selfish desires. The anger is the bitterness, the hostility, the harshness, and the ignorance is that unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom and confusion that the mind has about how the world truly works and how the world truly functions. So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma for you. But don't just leave it there, right? Because these are just statements that the Buddha is saying. But instead, look at your own life. And look at situations where you've made decisions through your craving, your selfish desires, and look at how it's produced unwholesome Kamma. Same thing with your anger, your bitterness and hostility. You've probably lost relationships, or certain jobs were ended, where you lost your job or something like that, or some other difficulty or struggle that you had. And then there's that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So you experience these things and you can look at your life and see that you were making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, and it produced unwholesome Kamma. Where at the time we might have been trying to blame somebody else for what we are experiencing. Or we might have said it was good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or some being like God or some entity like the universe. So you need to be able to see true reality that is coming from your own mind that is producing these results that you're experiencing. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this chapter. Okay, you're welcome, John. Pleased to help you. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to chapter 3. Is there someone who would like to read this one? I think I saw Samantha raised her hand. Would you like to read this, Samantha? Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
3 causes for the origination of unwholesome and wholesome Kamma. Monks, there are these 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. What 3? Craving arises with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. Craving arises with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. Craving arises with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. And how, monks, does craving arise with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire? One thinks about and mentally examines things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. As one does so, craving arises. When craving springs up, one is fettered by those things. The mental obsession is what I call the fetter. It is in this way that craving arises with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. And how does craving arise with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire? One thinks about and mentally examines things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. As one does so, craving arises. When craving springs up, one is fettered by those things. The mental obsession is what I call the fetter. It is in this way that craving arises with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. And how does craving arise with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire? One thinks about and mentally examines things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. As one does so, craving arises. When craving springs up, one is fettered by those things. The mental obsession is what I call the fetter. It is in this way that craving arises with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. These are the 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. There are, monks, these 3 causes for the origination of wholesome Kamma. What 3? Craving does not arise with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. Craving does not arise with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. Craving does not arise with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. And how, monks, does craving not arise with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire? One understands the future result of things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. Having understood the future result, one avoids it. Having avoided it, one becomes free from strong feelings in the mind, and having pierced through with wisdom, one sees. It is in this way that craving does not arise with reference to things in the past that are the basis for craving and desire. And how, monks, does craving not arise with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire? One understands the future result of things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. Having understood the future result, one avoids it. Having avoided, one becomes free from strong feelings in the mind, and having pierced through with wisdom, one sees. It is in this way that craving does not arise with reference to things in the future that are the basis for craving and desire. And how, monks, does craving not arise with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire? One understands the future result of things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. Having understood the future result, one avoids it. Having avoided it, one becomes free from strong feelings in the mind, and having pierced through with wisdom, one sees. It is in this way that craving does not arise with reference to things presently existing that are the basis for craving and desire. These are the three causes for the origination of wholesome Dhamma.
All right, thank you, Samantha. So here, this first part is talking about the creation of unwholesome karma. You learned in the previous discourse that it's craving, anger, and ignorance, and that's true. But then there's also this, where the mind can not only crave certain things right now, but it can actually be craving and longing from things in the past. Let's just say that in the past you went on a certain vacation or a certain holiday, and now you're in the present moment and your mind's longing, yearning for that same type of vacation that you had in the past. And now you're actually experiencing these unwholesome karma in the present moment, because now you're spending all this money and maybe even going into debt in order to be able to afford this vacation that you can no longer afford, where your mind isn't looking at the present moment, you're looking to the past with craving, and that's now producing unwholesome karma in the present moment. And the same thing can happen for the future, that your mind can be longing, yearning, and craving for something in the future. Now you're making unwise decisions that's producing unwholesome karma. And then presently, the mind can be craving in a certain situation presently, that now maybe you're in a store and you're seeing this certain product and you want to purchase it right now. Whereas if you waited, or you spend some more time to research, you could make a better choice about which product to purchase. But instead you purchase it right now, you start using it, and then in a week it actually breaks. And now you experience unwholesome karma because you ended up maybe losing your money perhaps, and you can't get a refund. Whereas if you would have taken your time and not had craving, done some research, you might have figured out that that's not really the best product to purchase, and there would be a better choice. And now, having taken your time and made a decision later, now you could make a better decision where you wouldn't have lost that money, right? So this is how craving produces the unwholesome karma from things that you're craving in the past, in the future, or something that you're craving presently. And then by not craving, it will produce wholesome karma. Because in the present moment, when you're starting to look to your vacation in the past, it's like, wow, that was really fun, but you know what? I can't afford it right now, and I'm not going to do that, right? So now in the present moment, you're experiencing wholesome karma, that you're not going into debt, right? And you're also not longing, yearning for the future and future things, that in the present moment you can be quite peaceful. And then in the present moment, when you see that thing that you're going to potentially buy and you realize, you know, I haven't really had time to do any research on this yet. Let me step back from this purchase and not purchase it right now. Let me kind of look at some research before I actually decide what to purchase. And now you'll produce wholesome karma, because now 3 days later, you can purchase a better product and you won't lose your money. So this is how you can produce wholesome karma, by choosing not to crave. So you're not interested in making any decisions based in craving at all. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go to chapter 4. Would somebody like to read this? Okay, looks like Marcy. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. There are three causes of the origination of wholesome karma. Monks, there are these three causes of the origination of wholesome karma. What three? Non-craving, generosity, is a cause of the origination of wholesome karma. Non-anger, loving kindness, is the cause of the origination of wholesome karma. Non-ignorance, wisdom, is the cause of the origination of wholesome karma. Suppose, monks, there are seeds that are intact, unspoiled, not damaged by wind and the sun's heat, fertile, well preserved. Then a man would burn them in a fire, reduce them to ashes, and the ashes would blow in the strong wind, or let them be carried away by the swift current of a river. In this way, those seeds would be cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, so that they are no more subject to future arising. So too, any karma that is created through non-craving, generosity, born of non-craving, caused by non-craving, originated by non-craving, is abandoned when the craving has vanished. It is cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, so that it is no more subject to future arising of unwholesome karma. So too, any karma that is created through non-anger, loving kindness, born of non-anger, caused by non-anger, originated by non-anger, is abandoned when anger has vanished. It is cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, so that it is no more subject to future arising of unwholesome karma. So too, any karma that is created through non-ignorance, wisdom, born of non-ignorance, caused by non-ignorance, originated by non-ignorance, is abandoned when ignorance is vanished. It is cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, so that it is no more subject to future arising of unwholesome karma. These monks are the three causes of the origination of wholesome karma. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So again, this is something that if you've been studying with me, you guys would have already learned as part of the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots and the 3 fires. I teach you the unwholesome roots and the wholesome roots. And then also as part of the natural law of Kamma, if you've heard me talk about any of those in our foundational classes. This is just the words of the Buddha to be able to help you see this. So let me know if you guys have questions here, that it's generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom that is producing wholesome Kamma, because these are the exact opposites of craving, anger, and ignorance. Let me know what questions you guys might have. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the next chapter. This is chapter 5. Looks like Pat would like to read that one. Go ahead, sir.
Inconceivable matters. Monks, there are these 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration. What for? 1. The experience of the Buddhas is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. 2. The experiences of one in the jhanas is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either frustration, madness, or frustration. 3. The exact result of Kamma is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. 4. Speculation about the world is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. These are the 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So these are 4 things that you can't fully understand, that it's impossible to do so. And if you tried to, the Buddha is saying that it would reap madness or frustration. So this first one, he's talking about the experiences of a Buddha. Like, you can understand what a Buddha is, that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of teachers or guides, that they dedicate their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime, and they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. And you can understand other qualities of a Buddha. But in terms of exactly what that person did in order to be able to get to that, like, they can talk about it with you, but you wouldn't be able to fully understand every aspect of what it is that they experience to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves. Remember, a Buddha is very rare in the world. You'll be an enlightened being when you get to enlightenment, but you won't be an actual Buddha. This type of individual is very rare in the world. So that Buddha would be able to explain to you what it is that they experience, but for you to be able to understand it in depth, the Buddha is saying you shouldn't even try to conceive this because it's inconceivable for you, that you can't even imagine, you can't even understand it fully. The same thing is true about experiencing the jhanas, that prior to being in the jhanas or in any of the 4 stages of enlightenment, you can study these things to understand what they are, but you won't be able to fully understand what these things are until you're actually experiencing them. It's kind of like I could explain to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like. If you've never had chocolate ice cream, I could describe it up, down, left, right, backwards, and forwards, but you're not going to fully understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you actually taste it yourself. But if you try to sit there and question me for hour after hour in order to be able to understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like, it would reap either madness or frustration because you wouldn't be able to fully understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like, having just having conversation about it. So the jhanas, and even though the Buddha doesn't describe it here, it's everything beyond the jhanas too, right? It's the jhanas, but also everything beyond the jhanas. It's an inconceivable matter. You can still study it, and you would be wise to understand it so that as your mind's experiencing it, you would know that you're experiencing it, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're actually experiencing it. The same thing is true about the natural law of Kamma and exactly the results that an individual would experience. You can't really fully conceive it 100%. So if somebody says, if I stole this car, what will I experience? Well, we can't say that you will exactly experience this, because you can't relate it to that level of detail. Or if somebody says, if I cheat on my husband or wife, what would I experience? We wouldn't be able to say, well, you will absolutely experience this, right? We can kind of talk, well, you could get beat up, you could get murdered, you could get sexually transmitted diseases, you could get in arguments and fights, you could lose your wealth and your money, you could lose your reputation in the community. These are all possible things. But the exact result of exactly what you're going to experience or someone else is going to experience because of a certain thing, the variables are too vast. There's too many variables to say exactly. So that's why it would reap madness or frustration if you tried to conceive it. But you can talk more generally about what you may or may not experience based on these particular types of decisions. And then this last one is about speculation of the world. What this is like conspiracy theories, unfounded truths. If you try to just speculate about what may or may not occur in the world, you would actually reap madness or frustration. Like if you tried to speculate, like sometimes people are worried that the USA is going to fall apart and crumble. And let's just say that you have a certain pension or you have a certain retirement check that is coming from the government of the USA. If somebody was trying to speculate about the fall of the USA and when this is going to happen and what that means for me in terms of my ability to sustain my life and things like this, it's going to reap madness or frustration. Or if there's certain conspiracy theories that are out there and you kind of dive into this and you go in all the weeds and trying to figure out all these little details, it's going to reap madness and frustration because you're just speculating about the world. There's no really tangible proof of any of these particular things. The mind is just speculating. So it's an inconceivable matter to speculate about the world. You wouldn't be interested in that. Instead, you're looking for tangible evidence to determine what may or may not occur in the future. So these are 4 inconceivable matters that the Buddha is helping you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma here, that the exact result is inconceivable. That's why when we talk about it more broadly and more generally of what is possible or what could be, but we're not talking in absolutes here, that you will absolutely experience this, because it's impossible to be able to talk about it that way. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Looks like Marcy has a question, so go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. And I apologize if I was unmuted before. I had a little conversation with my son. I wasn't sure if it went over. I apologize. So Teacher David, when we talk about karma and the results of our karma, we can't really know exactly what karma we're receiving is related to, correct?
You can't understand the exact result like in the future. Like if you said, David, if I steal a car, what's going to be my Kamma? We can't discern that. But once you've experienced Kamma, you can look backwards and you can see what were the decisions I made that led to that specific Kamma.
Okay. So the question I have, and I've been experiencing some karma lately where I'm trying, and I don't even know if it's even worth trying to delineate whether or not it's wholesome or unwholesome. But so I had an injury at work, and then so I kind of clocked that up to like unwholesome karma because I made some choices and decisions in that moment that resulted in perpetuating an injury. So I get that. But then as time went on, like I am experiencing like some of these amazing blessings right now that I just feel are wholesome karma. So am I okay with like being able to say, okay, yep, that was unwholesome because I made those choices and decisions, but now I'm experiencing wholesome karma because of the generosity that I practice and the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. I mean, right now, I can't work, but I want to say life feels very blissful. I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? It's kind of like so, it's a tumultuous time, kind of, but not really.
Yeah, these are different decisions that are leading to different things. So the decisions that you made at your work that you said you could have made better decisions that led to your injury, that's what led to your injury, those specific decisions. But now you're in another situation and you're making other decisions, and you have made other decisions in the past, and it's those decisions that are leading to what you're experiencing now. They're not blessings. There's no such thing. I know you're using that terminology and it's pretty common for people to talk that way, but what you're experiencing is wholesome karma based on decisions that you made through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. The unwholesome karma that you experienced was the injury based in probably craving. I don't know if there was any anger or ill will, maybe towards yourself, and then there was a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality. That's the injury. That's the unwholesome karma, it sounds like. I don't know the details of it, because you can also experience these things and it not be unwholesome karma too, depending on what was happening. But it sounds like you've tracked it down to some decisions that you made that were unwise. So there's these other decisions that are leading to the wholesome karma that you're experiencing. It's all looks maybe in your mind as one big thing, but they're actually
Right.
individual decisions that are being made, and you're experiencing the individual results of those things.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Teacher David. And I don't consider them blessings. I was explaining that I feel blissful in the situation that I'm in. But yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter 6. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Kristen, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Chapter 6. 10 courses of unwholesome karma. Impurity by body, kunda, is threefold. Impurity by speech is fourfold. Impurity by mind is threefold. And how kunda is impurity by body threefold. 1. Here, someone destroys life. He is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. 2. He takes what is not given. He steals the wealth and property of others in the village or forest. 3. He engages in sexual misconduct. He has sexual relations with women who are protected by their mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by their teachings, who have a husband, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one already engaged. It is in this way that impurity by body is threefold. And how kunda is impurity by speech fourfold. 1. Here, someone speaks falsehood. He is summoned to a council, to an assembly, to his relatives' presence, to his club, or to the court, and questioned as a witness thus. So, good man, tell what you know. Then, not knowing, he says, I know. Or knowing, he says, I don't know. Not seeing, he says, I see. Or seeing, he says, I do not see. Thus he is knowingly speaks falsehood for his own benefit, for others' benefit, or for some insignificant worldly benefit. 2. He speaks argumentatively. Having heard something here, he repeats it somewhere else in order to divide those people from these. Or having heard someone else, he repeats it to these people in order to divide them from those. Thus he is one who divides those who are united, a creator of divisions, one who enjoys separation, rejoices in separation, finds pleasure in separation, a speaker of words that creates separation. 3. He speaks harshly. He speaks such words as are rough, hard, hurtful to others, offensive to others, bordering on anger, inconducive to concentration. 4. He indulges in idle chatter. He speaks at an improper time, speaks falsely, speaks what is unbeneficial, speaks opposite to the teachings and the discipline. At an improper time, he speaks such words are unwise, unreasonable, rambling, and unbeneficial. It is in this way that impurity by speech is fourfold. And how Kunda is impurity by mind threefold. 1. Here, someone is full of longing, craving. He longs, craves for the wealth and property of others. Thus, may what belongings to another be mine. 2. He has a mind of ill will and intentions of hate. Thus, may these beings be slain, slaughtered, cut off, destroyed, or obliterated. 3. He holds wrong view, ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and has an incorrect perspective. Thus, there is nothing given, nothing sacrificed, nothing offered. There is no fruit or result of wholesome and unwholesome actions. There is no this world, no other world. There is no mother, no father. There are no beings spontaneously reborn. There are in the world no ascetics and Brahmins of right conduct and right practice who, having realized this world and the other world for themselves by direct knowledge, experience, make them known to others. It is in this way that impurity by mind is threefold. These kunda are the 10 courses of unwholesome karma. It is because people engaged in these 10 courses of unwholesome karma that hell, the animal realm, and the realm of inflicted spirits and other bad destinations are seen.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Here, the Buddha is going in and talking about very specific things by body, speech, and mind that are producing unwholesome karma. These are mostly matching up to the 5 precepts of what you've studied before, but there's other things in here too, other details. So these first 3 by body are all from the 5 precepts, right? The killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. In the 5 precepts, he elaborates on it a lot more and helps you to understand how to practice. And I've done that in various classes. And then speech, here he's talking about false speech, which is the 4th precept. But then he goes into argumentative speech, understanding that that produces unwholesome karma. I'm sure you've been in arguments where you've been in knockdown, drag out fights with people, and you see it just produces unwholesome karma. You get angry, you get frustrated, you get stressed, you get anxiety, you have broken relationships, you lost your job, or any number of different things that you can experience as a way of being argumentative with people. So you would like to eliminate these things. And then the same thing with harsh speech and idle chatter. These are speeches that are all based in craving. All of this stuff is based in craving, anger, and ignorance. But what you're doing here is you're arising wisdom to be able to see how unwise these things are, that it's producing unwholesome karma for you, that even though you've done these things in the past, that you can improve that for the future, that you can choose to no longer do these things. And that's part of cleaning up your unwholesome karma, is to no longer do these things. If you're not quite sure what idle chatter is, this is frivolous speech. This is unpurposeful, unbeneficial speech, where your mind is just chatting yada, 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 where there isn't really any kind of purpose behind it. It's rambling, right? So that's what idle chatter is. And then there's this impurity by mind that is threefold. This comes back to craving, anger, and ignorance. That's what the Buddha is talking about. When he talks about full of longing, that's craving. When he talks about a mind of ill will, that's anger and hatred. And when he talks about wrong view, he's talking about ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And notice here, as part of this, he talks about there's no fruit or result of wholesome or unwholesome actions. What he's saying here is part of the ignorance that the mind has is it doesn't understand the natural law of karma. When he says there's no fruit or result of wholesome or unwholesome actions, that means that a person thinks that, I can just do anything, either wholesome or unwholesome, and it's not going to produce any particular result. And in this case, an individual would have no understanding of the natural law of karma. So the Buddha is going through a lot of details here. Let me know if you guys have questions on this, because this chapter And the next one is actually very similar. This chapter 7, this is just the opposite of what we just read. So we don't need to necessarily read this one here. This is where the Buddha talks about the opposite, that having abandoned the destruction of life, or abandoned taking what is not given, abandoned sexual misconduct, that produces wholesome Kamma. And then the same thing with speech, that having abandoned false speech and argumentative speech, having abandoned harsh speech and idle chatter, that's going to produce wholesome Kamma. And then when your mind is without longing or craving, when your mind is a mind of goodwill or loving kindness, and when you have wisdom, when your mind has right view, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma. So when you're reading these things, of course, you would like to purge and eliminate the unwholesome, and you would like to cultivate the wholesome. So the Buddha is giving that to you here in these two discourses. So let me know what questions you guys have on either of these two chapters. Okay, looks like, Kristen, I see your hands up. Is that from reading or you have a question? Okay, you just put it down. All right, so let's go to the next one. This is chapter 8. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
New and old Kamma. Monks, I will teach you new and old Kamma, the elimination of unwholesome Dhamma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. And what, monks, is old Kamma? The eye is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The ear is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The nose is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The tongue is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The body is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The mind is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. This is called old Kamma. And what, monks, is new Kamma? Whatever action one does now by body, speech, or mind, this is called new Kamma. And what, monks, is the elimination of unwholesome Kamma? When one reaches liberation through the elimination of unwholesome bodily action, verbal action, and mental action, this is called the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. And what, monks, is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma? It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Thus, monks, I have taught old Kamma, I have taught new Kamma, I have taught the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, and I have taught the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. Whatever should be done, monks, by a compassionate teacher, out of compassion for his disciples, aspiring for their welfare, that I have done for you. These are the feet of trees, monks. These are empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not be complacent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. So I've taught you guys old Kamma and new Kamma, and then wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma, and all the various classes that I've been teaching as the foundational text in the foundational programs that I share. Hear the words of the Buddha, you can see the same things that I was teaching you. So here when he's talking about old Kamma, he's talking about this body is old Kamma, because when you come into the world as a child, you haven't made any decisions yet that this mind is now coming into this body. That's all old Kamma from your previous life. But now as you make decisions in this life, if you're not necessarily taking care of this body, it's going to accumulate into unwholesome Kamma in this life. But you're starting out with old Kamma from your previous life. That's how you got this particular body. This is old Kamma. So then there's new Kamma. New Kamma is any decisions that you're making now by body, speech, and mind that is going to produce this new Kamma for you. So some examples that I give you here that are beyond just the body, because the Buddha is talking about and focusing on the body here, but you can actually have old Kamma even in this life. Let's just say that in the past you lied on some tax forms like 3 years ago, and now you get a notice in the mail that you have $1,000 that you owe the government for the initial amount that you lied about, and then there's $1,000 penalty and a $1,000 interest. And now let's just say this person owes the government $3,000, and now they're getting that notice in the mail today based on decisions that they made 3 years ago. This is old, unwholesome Kamma that they're experiencing. And if you didn't understand these teachings of the Buddha, you might rip this up, thinking that you can run and hide from it. Rip it up and throw it away. Or you might call up the government or write them a letter and be nasty and bitter and harsh and hostile with them, thinking that somehow that's going to help you. Well, in that situation, you're producing new, unwholesome Kamma that you're going to have to deal with in the future. You're experiencing this old unwholesome Kamma coming back to you, but now in the present moment, whatever decisions that you make, you're going to produce new Kamma. And that new Kamma is either going to be wholesome or unwholesome. And if you just rip up this letter or you call the government and you're bitter and harsh and hostile with them, you're just producing new unwholesome Kamma that you're going to have to deal with in the future. But if you understand that your goal in this path to enlightenment is to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma that's coming back to you, when this old unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, you've got to figure out, how do I extinguish it? And the way you extinguish it is by producing new wholesome Kamma. It's the Eightfold Path that's going to guide you in creating new wholesome Kamma. So now, instead of ripping up the letter or calling the government, being bitter and harsh and hostile with them, you call them up and you're polite. You're kind. You accept responsibility. You say, hey, look, I'm sorry for this oversight. I really apologize. I'd like to make amends with this, but I don't have $3,000. I'm so sorry. And then they might say, well, you know what? You've been so kind. You've been so friendly. How about if we drop off the penalty and we drop off the interest and you just pay us $1,000? And then I might be very kind and polite with them, thank them for their offer. And I might even say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't even have $1,000. And now, because I'm being so polite and respectful, maybe they say, hey, how about we work out a payment plan? How about you pay us over the course of multiple months, right? And this is the way you now extinguish that over the next several months, you're making payments on this, and now it goes away, right? You've created new wholesome Kamma for yourself. And that's because you're making decisions now in the present moment. Right? So this is what you would ultimately like to do, is as all this unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, this old unwholesome Kamma is coming back, now in the present moment, make new decisions that are producing new wholesome Kamma. You're also going to have old wholesome Kamma coming back to you as well. That's possible too. That's what Marcy was talking about there. That she's got some old wholesome Kamma that's coming back to her, right? So the Buddha is talking about this elimination of unwholesome Kamma is to reach liberation, where you eliminate your unwholesome bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. That's how you're going to eliminate your unwholesome Kamma. And the way you do that is through the Eightfold Path. One of the ways that I think about this is that before this path to enlightenment, it's like we have an oil pipe, and this oil pipe is busted, and it's spewing oil all over the world. This is our unwholesome conduct. Our bodily actions, our verbal actions, and our mental actions. We're spewing oil all over the world. Well, if you're going to clean up all your old unwholesome Kamma, you're not going to go clean up what's on the floor first. That's not the way you're going to do this, right? Instead, you got to shut down the oil pipe. You got to stop spewing oil all over the world. So that's why the Eightfold Path is there, to teach you how to shut down this oil pipe so you can stop functioning with wrong view and wrong intention and wrong speech and wrong action and wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. That's shutting down the oil pipe. And now, as you shut down the oil pipe, bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and now you're up and running on the Eightfold Path, as any old unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, you got to extinguish that. So now you can go clean up the mess that's on the floor, right? So you would like to shut down this oil pipe. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you shut down your unwise moral conduct, so you're not just continuing to spew oil all over the world. And that's what's going to help you to get to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. And that's why here at the end, the Buddha just basically says, okay, you would be wise to go meditate. right? Like go meditate, train your mind through meditation, because that's what's going to eliminate craving. It's going to help you eliminate anger, right? And there's other things you need to do besides meditation too, but that's what's knocking that down. What you guys are going to see by the time you get to the end of this book is the highest quality of wholesome Kamma that you could generate is to actually do breathing mindfulness meditation. That's the highest wholesome Kamma that you could generate. The second highest wholesome Kamma that you can generate is loving kindness meditation. So that's why the Buddha is saying, hey, you would like to extinguish all this unwholesome Kamma? Go meditate. That's the highest quality of Kamma that you can generate, because you're knocking down the craving, anger, and ignorance that's in your mind. So you'll make less and less decisions through that. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. This is helping you to understand new Kamma and old Kamma. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go to the next one. This is chapter 9, I think it is. Let's see here. Yeah, chapter 9. Is there someone who would like to read this one? This is kind of short. Okay, it looks like, I can't remember. Let's see. I think, Samantha, you read that last one. So maybe Marcy, you read this next one?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This body is old Kamma. Monks, this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is old Kamma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, choices, decisions, as something to be felt. Therein, monks, the instructed noble disciple attends carefully and closely to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formation comes to be. With volitional formation as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as a condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the origination of this whole mass of discontentedness. But with the remainderless fading away and elimination of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, comes elimination of volitional formations, choices, and decisions. With the elimination of volitional formation and elimination of consciousness, all aspects of dependent origination. With the elimination of birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So remember, whenever you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. So part of that old unwholesome Kamma that we experience, there's a certain amount of wholesome Kamma that we're experiencing by being in this human world, but there's a certain amount of unwholesome Kamma that we're experiencing as well because of the ignorance from our previous life and making decisions that were unwise. It led to continuous rebirth, right? That there's this continuous rebirth that is continuing to occur. And that's what dependent origination is helping you to be able to see. That because of that initial ignorance or unknowing of true reality, is leading to these continuous factors, one condition leading to the next, which is leading to continuous rebirth. And this body is old Kamma that we're experiencing from our previous life of practicing based in ignorance. But now we can cultivate wisdom, and we can get to a point where we don't experience rebirth by extinguishing that ignorance through the cultivation of wisdom. And you can see that the mind's experiencing the enlightened mental state. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter, that this body is old Kamma, and the Buddha's helping you to be able to see that through ignorance, that it's leading to the creation of continuous life and continuous rebirths. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we've got our last chapter for today, which is chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome actions. Then the Niganta Diga Tapasi asked the perfectly enlightened one, "Are you, friend Gotama, how many kinds of rod do you describe for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action?" Tapasi, the Tathagata is not accustomed to use the description rod. The Tathagata is accustomed to use the description action. But, friend Gotama, how many kinds of action do you describe for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action? Tapasi, I describe 3 kinds of action for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of the unwholesome action, that is, bodily action, verbal action, and mental action. How then, friend Gotama, is bodily action one, verbal action another, and mental action still another? Bodily action is one Tapasi, verbal action is another, and mental action is still another. Of these 3 kinds of action, friend Gotama, thus analyzed and distinguished, which kind of action do you describe as the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action? Bodily action, or verbal action, or mental action? Of these 3 kinds of action Tapasi, thus analyzed and distinguished, I describe mental action as the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, and not so much bodily action and verbal action. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Thus the Niganta Diga Tapasi made the perfectly enlightened one maintain his statement up to the 3rd time, after which he rose from his seat and went to the Niganta Nataputta. Thereafter, the household Upali came to the perfectly enlightened one to ask about the conversation the perfectly enlightened one had with Niganta Tapasi, and discussed that the bodily action is the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, and not so much the verbal action and the mental action. The perfectly enlightened one, however, maintained his doctrine and spoke further. What do you think, householder? Is this town of Nalanda successful and prosperous? Is it populous and crowded with people? Yes, venerable sir, it is. What do you think, householder? Suppose a man came here brandishing a sword and spoke thus, "In one moment and one instant, I will make all the living beings in this town of Nalanda into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh." What do you think, householder? Would that man be able to do that? Venerable sir, 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 men would not be able to make all the living beings in this town of Nalanda into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh, in one moment or instant. So what does a single trivial man count for? What do you think, householder? Suppose some ascetic or Brahmin came here possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of mind, and he spoke thus, "I will reduce this town of Nalanda to ashes with one mental act of hate." What do you think, householder? Would such an ascetic or Brahmin be able to do that? Venerable sir, such an ascetic or Brahmin possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of mind would be able to reduce 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 Nalandas to ashes with one mental act of hate. So what does a single trivial Nalanda count for? Householder, pay attention how you reply. What you said afterwards does not agree with what you said before, nor does what you said agree before with what you said afterwards.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So what the Buddha is helping this individual to understand is that mental action is actually more defiled and actually produces more unwholesome results than bodily actions or verbal actions. it still needs to be purified. The bodily actions and the verbal actions need to be improved. But all of that is coming from the source, which is the mental action. So that's why the Buddha is saying that that's the most reprehensible. Because if somebody went out with a sword, like he's talking about, and trying to reduce a town to, rubble essentially with just a bodily action, they wouldn't be able to do that with just one bodily action. But with a mental action, you'd actually be able to do that because it would kind of ripple through the community. That if you put one unwholesome mental action out, that this now ripples through the community and people start to now function through that unwholesomeness. So that's why the Buddha is saying that, hey, that it's this mental action that is the most defiled, the most reprehensible. This particular person had the Buddha recount this 3 different times to confirm that the Buddha was saying what he thought he was saying, is that it was mental action that is actually the most defiled. But this householder, this individual who was asking the Buddha questions, they didn't understand that, and they thought that it was something else, that it wasn't mental action. So here you can see that's why the Buddha focuses his teaching on purification of the mind. Because if you purify the mind, that's where your bodily actions and your verbal actions are coming from anyway. So if you clear up the root cause, which is the mind, now you can improve your bodily actions and your verbal actions because you've gone back to the source, which is the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so we'll just end class the way I typically do, which is thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for participating in class or attending and actively learning on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is chapters 11 through 20. If you'd like to read those before or after class, you're more than welcome to do that. We're going to keep on going through the rest of the book series in this same way. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in the group learning program in Volume 1, Chapter 22, which is titled Mental Illness, a Modern Day Delusion. This is where you learn about things like ADHD, ADD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, bulimia, anorexia, and all these things, helping you to see how through training the mind, the symptoms of these things can actually be purified and eliminated. Oftentimes, people think that it's a mental disorder or something like this that is causing these things. They think it's like a defect in the brain. But you can actually trace and you can actually see how it's just an untrained mind. And when you train the mind, you can eliminate the symptoms. The anguish that people are experiencing during the times that they would say they were mentally ill, that is actually true and real. But the cause of that is not brain chemistry. It's actually coming from an untrained mind. So I'm going to be teaching that tomorrow as part of our class. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.